It's the Joe Holker Show presented by PrizePicks. Week 9 and the number 1 stack on DraftKings is in this game. We're going to walk through Eagles, Cowboys, and build a lineup at the end.
The typical highest game total, 4 p.m., like has everything going for it that like we look for in DFS. This week too, we really only have a couple games, this game and then Seattle Ravens, where you're like, these are two competent playoff teams like facing each other, where there could be like pushback, like reciprocal pushback. Not that the gross games can't get there for us either. They always do. Thank you, Colts, every week. But this is a game when you look at it, like the Eagles have scored on a league high, 48.8% of their possessions. Dallas is third. Eagles like lead the NFL in third down conversion rate. Dallas is third. Eagles are second in the NFL in rate of drives to reach the red zone or score prior. Dallas is third. Like it just has like everything kind of going for it. Great division game. And it's the first time we're going to get to see Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott, play each other. Last week we were robbed of it both games. The first game, Dak didn't play and Cooper Rush played. And the second game, Hurts didn't play, Gardner Minshew played. So we're going to get to see these teams kind of go heads up, although Jalen Hurts is coming in this one a little bit banged up. I guess we'll start there with the Hurts stuff, right? Hurts has been awesome for fantasy, top 5 scorer in 5 of his past 6 games, but we do have to have some concern in this matchup that this knee injury, and there was reports that after the game on Sunday that he had to have an hour-long treatment afterwards for his knee. He only scrambled 1 time last week, and you were able to get by with that because you can just throw all over the Commanders. We talked on it in the last video of the passing production that they're allowing, and he only rushed 4 times for 6 yards in totality, season low scramble rate. The week before against Miami, when he got hurt in the first half of that game, he had a season low 21 rushing yards. So it is something to keep an eye on because we're going to want the mobility for Jalen Hurts in this matchup. Hurts has only faced one kind of really good defense this year, and it was the Jets, and he did face them without Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, and he had a season low 9.2 passing points in that game, but he was able to get there for fantasy because he had 10.7 rushing points, kind of propelled himself to that top 5 finish. When Jalen Hurts faced Dallas and only faced them once last season, he only threw for 155 yards. It was the second lowest passing yards in a game. He did the 2 passing touches. He had 40 rushing yards. Dallas leads the NFL in pressure rate, so we're going to want that mobility here. So maybe we go the inverse route. I think you can still play Hurts in a tournament setting, but it maybe just shifts like ownership more to the Dak side of things in this build.
Yeah, I talked about it on the other video, but this was so drastic. I think we should talk about it just real quick. So Prop Drop newsletter, I've been talking about the last couple of weeks. I do like a way too early drop on Wednesdays, typically, just some of the lines that look extremely out of whack, just to get a little bit of value down early in the week. This is the week where this AJ Brown thing, 94.5 receiving yards. I'm not saying you can't get there. Obviously, he's been going nuclear. It's a great spot, all of those things, but you can always feel pretty good about grabbing a line like this early in the week. When you check it, even the next day, and AJ Brown is at 80.5 receiving yards. So to go from 94.5 receiving yards to 80.5 on an under, I feel pretty good about getting 14 yards of value there. So if you guys want to get access to this newsletter, there is a link in the description if you're checking out the prize picks, the props, all that good stuff. We do a bunch of giveaways on Twitter as well if we sweep all the fun stuff. So make sure you guys check that. I did also take an under on the Hurts stuff, which I'm a little bit more squeamish about, but I do try and correlate some of that stuff while I can. Yeah, bone bruise for Hurts though, right? Is that the official word on what he's battling through, or is there something else?
Yeah, that's what they're calling it. He's playing with that brace on his knee, but it definitely has shown up in the box score. But like we'll see when he, it could be a thing where he's just like over it, right? Like we don't know, but it's enough that at his price tag, you want to at least, I think, have some concern if like you're leaning on him as a core play.
Yeah, 8K for Hurts. Definitely want to be sure about that before we get there. So
pair with the matchup, as well. Like there's one thing like when you say like, all right, you got him against the Commanders, he doesn't need to run, but like he's gonna need some mobility against this. Like just dropping back and throwing for 300 yards in the Cowboys is probably in the lower end of probability of outcomes.
For sure. Okay, on the Philly side of the ball then, is AJ Brown still the guy that you want to have if you have to like kind of stack up Hurts? Like, do you have any interest in kind of going a little bit cheaper or getting into the run game on the side of the ball?
There are some options here. I mean, obviously it does start with, AJ Brown, though. I mean, 6 straight games of 127 or more receiving yards. Also, I brought up some of the stats like on the matchups video. Like if Dallas is going to play as much man coverage as they're playing, they're third in the NFL playing man coverage on 38.6% of opponent passing plays. AJ Brown on 79 routes against man coverage has been targeted 50% of the time. He's third in the NFL with 4.3 yards per route run against man coverage. He leads the NFL in targets against man coverage. He leads the NFL in receptions against man coverage. He leads the league in receiving yards against man coverage. Last season, when these two teams played, he only ran 21 pass routes against man coverage, but 5.9 yards per route run. He caught 7 of 9 targets for 124 yards and a touchdown. If Dallas, the handful of times that they mix in some man coverage on Sunday, AJ Brown's going to have a chance to make some big plays. Devontae Smith is just kind of the problem with Devontae Smith is we were on Devontae Smith last week. It was a really good tournament play. We called him out last week. Is you're just not getting the targets, and it's fine if you only get 20%.
He's 7,100. Like he's not free. Yeah.
But if you're only going to get 20% of the team targets at that price tag against a good defense, like you can make that work against the Commanders.
Right.
Having it work against Dallas, I think is harder. But like you can always kind of keep him involved in doubles and as a tournament play. I think the most interesting ancillary passing piece in this game is probably Dallas Goedert.
Okay.
He leads all tight ends in routes run on the season. So he's still got this attachment to this good offense. His ADOT is down 2 yards over his career average, but Dallas is 20th in yards per target allowed to tight ends. They're 19th in catch rate allowed to tight ends, and they are 30th in touchdown rate to allowed to opposing tight ends. So Dallas Goedert, if you're out like onslaughting this game and you're either adding a guy with Hurts or you're just trying to get away from AJ Brown, I think Dallas Goedert is the guy that kind of stands out the most to me. On the Eagles side.
4,800 for Goddard. So yeah, I think that's a really nice way to gain access to this game. At least right now, sub 5% ownership for Goddard looks pretty strong as well. So Dallas, there's probably more things to talk through here. Obviously, Tony Pollard hasn't been what we expected from a season-long perspective. We thought last week might be the spot, and then Dak and CD just go completely nuclear, right? So how are you approaching the Dallas side of the ball after a pretty big win last week and a lot of points through the air?
Yeah, I think also, too, if Dallas wants to have success in this game, I mean, we've seen Sam Howell and Eric Bieniemy kind of show you what you need to do against the Eagles. And, like, you want to be aggressive. You want to be aggressive, throw on early downs, and throw outside the numbers. And the Commanders have had the most success against this defense because of that. So we have to place faith in Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer, of all people, to maybe do the right thing. But we have seen now Howell twice, Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins log QB1 scoring weeks against the Eagles. The Mac Jones one was just strictly volume based. Kirk Cousins was good, but it was also game script, kind of forced that. But Dak is really good under pressure this season. He's completing a league high 63.8% of his passes under pressure. He's second in the NFL in yards per pass attempt under pressure, 4th in quarterback rating. He also has under his resume, he was 31 of 38 against the Jets team that we talked about kind of with Jalen Hurts in that game. He had 18.2 passing points in that game. And they had Sauce Gardner and they had DJ Reed. So we do have a sample of Dak actually functionally being really good against this pass defense. He's also been awesome the last 2 weeks. It's just that he seems to have in these big spots, these letdown games. And that's what happened in the 49ers game, right? Like, and people run about that. Dak's always been one of these guys, like people run, like they just wait for him to have that bad game and then he just gets dragged for it. That's the Kirk Cousins corollary, right? That's been Kirk Cousins over his career. People just wait for Kirk Cousins to have like this bad game in this big spot, and then he just gets dragged. That's kind of how Dak's kind of had the same career, but I do think he's probably easier to build around, definitely on DraftKings compared to FanDuel. He is higher priced on FanDuel because we can pair him with CeeDee Lamb. And CeeDee Lamb has had this fundamental usage in how the Cowboys have used him. Over the past 2 games, the Cowboys have played CeeDee Lamb out wide for 43% and 49% of his snaps, the 2 highest rates in games this season. On the outside in those games, he's averaged 4.6 yards per route run. He's caught 8 of 9 targets, 153 yards, and a touchdown. Also, he's still really good in the slot when he plays in there. 3.2 yards per route run in those games in the slot, 11 catches, 132 yards, and a touchdown. He's just really good everywhere because he's a good player, but we're getting access now to more fantasy what's a fantasy fat, high cholesterol targets, right? Playing on the outside.
That's getting a new one for me, Reeves. I like it. I might have to bring that one back. Yeah, I like that. The high cholesterol targets. Nice.
And that's where you want to attack the Eagles, as I led in early on. They're allowing 10.3 receptions per game to opposing boundary wide receivers. That's 31st in the NFL. They've allowed a 7.9% touchdown rate to opposing boundary wide receivers. That's also 31st in the NFL. We've seen wide receiver ones the past month get over on them. Cooper Kupp, 8 for 8, 118. Garrett Wilson, 8 for 90. Tyreek Hill, 11 for 88 and a touchdown. Terry McLaurin last week, 5 for 63 and a touchdown. So CeeDee Lamb, he's getting new unique usage. Dallas is finding ways to use him in unique ways. It lines up with this matchup. I also think the way where the Eagles are getting beat, it does open the door for guys like a Michael Gallup is playing 95% of his snaps on the outside. He's 3,600, like a really cheap kind of just double if you want to play on it.
You like him more than Cooks? Like 4,400 for Cooks. There's a price difference there, obviously, but man, Gallup and like just in general, Gallup to Dak has just not been too seamless this year so far.
No, he still is leading though. Brandon Cooks in targets per out run. He's been targeted basically 3% rate higher than Cooks has. They haven't been hyper efficient, but he does play 95% of his snaps on the outside. Like I said, Cooks is only playing 70. So as they've started moving Lamb more outside on the downs, they're moving Lamb outside. Cooks is moving into the slot in those situations.
Okay.
So that's where they're like, Gallup is just doing his thing on the outside. He's not moving, but there's like the transition when Lamb's going out, Cooks is going in.
That's good.
And also, Jake Ferguson is still on the board, I think. I mean, you look at last week, he ran a route on 85% of the team dropbacks. That was now his 5th straight game where he's gone over his route rate from the game prior. Eventually, it's going to cap. He's not going to get to 100%. But also, he just has this red zone equity. And we saw it again last week, his red zone touchdown. He's been targeted on 35% of his routes in the red zone. Only Travis Kelce is higher. So the Eagles have faced the 4th fewest targets to tight ends this year. But on those targets, they're 27th in yards per target, 30th in catch rate, and 30th in touchdown rate allowed. We saw Logan Thomas again get there last week. So Jake Ferguson is gives you another stacking partner here in this game.
I like it. We got to talk about Tony Pollard. I need your take on this guy. What's the deal with this dude? Is it because everyone's piled into him last week, this is the week, or has it just been some weird game scripts with Dallas across the board this year? What are your thoughts?
Well, definitely I do believe a lot has been the game script stuff. I mean, so you look at Dallas and their 3 blowout wins against the Patriots, the Giants, the Rams, then you pair their blowout loss with the 49ers. There's a clear usage trend. The Cowboys are getting him off the field and they don't have to. I mean, he's had 57%, 48%, 57%, and 61% of the backfield touches in those games. Just they're getting him off the field. In the 3 other games that have been neutral game script games, he's had 32 touches, 26 touches, and 21 touches, gone over 100 yards in all of those games. 74%, 88%, 70% of the backfield touches in those games. So when they're a neutral game script, he's still getting the football. The problem is expecting this to be more of a neutral game.
Right.
This is a terrible matchup. It's just an awful matchup, man. I mean, the Eagles have allowed 2 running backs this season to reach 50 yards. The most rushing yards they've allowed to a running back is 59 yards in a game this season. They're a pass funnel. They've allowed 1 rushing touchdown to a running back. And it was a play where they arguably let the running back score. It was the Breece Hall touchdown at the end of the game,
right,
where they basically were just like, we need you to get in the end zone so we can get the ball back. They allowed the fewest rushing points per game to opposing running backs. If you are looking for an out, because Tony Pollard does have receiving ability, they are 15th in receiving points allowed per game to backfields. I just think it's a crap matchup. The price is right, and I can understand, like, you want to do the inverse thing last week, right? Where Pollard was going to be the more popular play, so you got leverage through Lamb. But I just don't know if Pollard in this particular matchup has that kind of ceiling.
All right, we talked about it briefly, but before we build a lineup, I wanted to remind everyone that all of my favorite player props each and every week are going out in an email newsletter now. It's called Prop Drop. There's a link in the description for that, so you can get access to that. That's where you're going to get all of these picks before they make it to Twitter, and we know that these lines move extremely quickly. And then make sure you hit notifications as well on the Twitter side of things so that you can get involved in the giveaways, doing a bunch of those. Really going to ramp that up, I think, throughout this week and beyond as well. All right, Reeves, I want to get you out of here on time. So where do you want to start with our DraftKings lineup today if we were to build around this game? Do you have like a specific stack in mind for this one?
Yeah, I think we do the Dak. We do Dak Lamb. We haven't done an old-fashioned onslaught in a while. So let's do Dak Lamb, Gallup, and we'll do A.J. Brown and Goddard. We'll just go. Let's go nuts.
Okay. So we got A.J. Brown and Goddard on the other side. And then we've been talking about just on the cheaper side of things, the Giants are just so cheap all the way down there at 2,300, kind of as our placeholder defense. Again, these are the type of lineups that you should be maneuvering on your own throughout the week and making some changes. So that's probably going to be the chalk at defense. So we got 5,300 the rest of the way for 2 running backs
Packers,
and a flex.
Patriots. There's a lot of defensive options. Listen, there's no shortage of backup quarterbacks playing this week for you to attack.
Yeah, it gets almost easier to figure out.
Let me ask you from a tournament perspective, how wild is it like just paying up for the Browns this week? Like if you just like how unique do you think it is just playing?
I think we've just had this conversation so many times over the years and it almost never works out. Okay. But I mean, there's worse ideas. I think if you can like back your way into like a really highly correlated lineup and you just end up with a lot of salary, I think it's probably okay. I think the only thing you can probably say in favor of it is if we end up actually getting the Browns at like sub 5% ownership, then I can see it it being something that ends up being maybe a differentiator if these other ones fail. The problem is like we have these cheaper ones and you need like 3 teams to fail.
You need them all to fail.
Yeah,
you need
like
all
for that to be worth it, you need all 3 of those to fail. And like you said, there's no shortage of good spots for defenses this week. So, all right.
Yeah. So
cheap
let's do
the rest of the way probably.
Yeah, we have to get cheap because we paid for those wide receivers. I think let's do a mini that we talked about on the other show. Okay. Let's actually do our Jonathan Taylor team.
Nice. Okay.
With our guy Mingo.
That's what I was gonna say. We can get your boy Mingo in there at 3,400, and then we got 6,200 in this last spot. So at running back, we're looking at Brian Robinson, Gus Edwards. We could just play both these guys. We could play Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor together if we really wanted
to. Double, yeah. So you kind of have dealer's choice to play. You got Rashad White down there, who I talked about on the other show too, possibly being like a guy you could play. You can use this salary to come up on defense.
Yep.
If you want, like
this is kind of like I think we've overstacked here, right? So this is probably a smaller field build. I actually think it's okay to play Taylor and Moss together on this roster, just because we know the volume and the place are going to be there. It adds to our mini stack. I think that's totally fine. I'm gonna take the wheel here and just say we're playing both of them this week.